I like dark chocolate. And if I tell my husband, hey, I really like dark chocolate, and it would be really special if every now and then you surprised me with it. If I tell my husband that, and then he goes ahead and makes the effort to do that, there was a time where I wouldn't feel entirely great about that. Because one, I didn't think that I had to state my wants or needs directly to my partner. I thought that I should just be able to say something like, I like dark chocolate in passing, and then my partner would be paying attention to everything that I'm saying all the time and pick up on these tiny little breadcrumb hints, and then go ahead and meet my wants and needs exactly how and when I want them met without those things ever being directly communicated to him. Two, I thought that if I had to ask for that, right, it takes a lot of the thought and the meaning out of that gesture, because it's like, you're only doing this for me. If you really loved me or cared about me, like, you would want to do these things on your own without me having to ask. But that's not the case. And I'm so thankful to be at a point in my life, in my relationship, in my healing journey, where I understand that if I directly communicate my wants and needs to my partner, which is a really healthy thing to do in a relationship, and then he takes the time and puts the effort in to make sure that those needs are met, that is one of the clearest indications of love and care. And just because I said it and I voiced these things doesn't take any of the meaning or the thoughtfulness out of that gesture.
So not only did I find that video refreshing, I also think that it is really important. I think that most of us can relate to this experience or dynamic at some level.
Where's my jacket?
I have your jacket!
Fine.
Do you want it?
No!
You know what?
Eat it!
And I think that this is going to be a very effective video to help you evolve the communication in your relationships. So hit that like button and settle in. Unsurprisingly, this video had quite a few women up in arms in the comment section, flat out refusing to communicate and cooperate. And of course, all of these behaviors are not gender specific, but I generally find it far more common for women to be the ones expecting men to be mind readers and to pursue them and do all of the things without being asked and not be taught how to love. And of course, I'm also speaking from my own experiences as a man. I think a lot of people do not know how to communicate their needs in a healthy way without feeling guilty or becoming passive aggressive or building resentment through setting unrealistic and unspoken expectations. And for the most part, this is not directly the fault of these people. I would actually theorize that most of the people who are the most attentive and sensitive to tiny details and hints and breadcrumbs and micro expressions and slight shifts in emotional energy are like that because they grew up in unstable and toxic or inattentive environments where being hyper vigilant kept them safe, and they learned that their needs and communication of those needs was unwelcome. It messes you up mentally and emotionally to grow up in a place where you had to pay attention to details or else suffer traumatic consequences. You were not supposed to have to be hyper aware of mom or dad's energy and body language to know if they were on the warpath or under constant threat of danger and neglect. It messes you up mentally and emotionally to have your childhood attempts at love and connection be thrown in your face and spit on, or to have your needs met with indifference and ridicule. Like asking your mom to help you with your homework and then she turns around and calls you stupid. Or hoping your dad will finally show up at your ball game, but just like with everything else, he never does. And you dare not even ask, especially after the one time that you did and he promised that he would, but once again, he broke his word. At some point, through all of the rejection and disappointment and pain, you learn that your needs are secondary, maybe even worthless, and the mere thought of communicating them fills you with dread and discomfort, so you avoid it altogether. This is a defense mechanism. This is what kept you safe, and yet deep down, you still hope that that one day someone will break through your defenses and love you in all the ways that you are too afraid to ask for. I mean, we could also talk about the people who may have been overly coddled by their parents as well, that they continued to wipe their asses and tie their shoes until they were grown adults, and so now they're going out into relationships looking for a partner who's going to do that same thing without ever being asked or ever communicating any of these needs. But I don't want to take this in too many directions. People who expect their significant other to be a mind reader and just know typically still have their settings in survival mode. They are trying to avoid their own discomfort around their needs, so they place all of the responsibility for them on others. They have convinced themselves that if someone really loves them, they shouldn't have to ask for anything, nor ever teach anyone how they need to be loved, which is a wounded way of thinking. No one else is ever going to be good enough to fill the hole in a faulty idea of love. Other people can only support your healing and support your learning to regulate your own emotions. Expecting your partner to read minds or be as sensitive as you are in picking up on cues and doing the things the way that you would do them is unfair and very likely to be based in trauma. And if you really are with someone who doesn't do anything kind or thoughtful without being asked, or who refuses to partner with you and attune to your needs, then maybe it's time to stop asking why and begging people to change. Which, if you are doing that, that also exposes you as unhealed and needing to learn that lesson. Stop trying to change people. I don't think enough people understand that we are very likely to align with relationships that will reflect the stories that we are telling ourselves. Our relationships will continue to try and teach us the lessons that we refuse to learn. This reminds me of an idea that I first came across in the book, The 4 Agreements, which suggested that the level at which we abuse ourselves will be reflected in the level at which we will allow abuse. I think that there is a lot of applicable truth to that. Like I always say, our relationships are reflections of us. For example, someone who struggles with boundaries will tend to find themselves in relationships where their boundaries are disrespected. Or a man who thinks that his money defines the majority of his worth will tend to lead with his money and so align with women who only care about him for his money. Or a man who grew up dependent on his mother and never psychologically severed his umbilical cord, he will seek the same dependency in his relationships. Our relationships will always reveal what we have not healed. Maybe it's also helpful to recognize neurodiversity as well in this conversation, because maybe your partner is in a different position on the spectrum than you are. So maybe picking up on emotional hints and nuance is neurologically more difficult, and maybe more direct communication is necessary. And maybe it's helpful to consider that the way that their brain functions and the way that they process information and emotions is not wrong. It's just different than you and is sold separately from how much you may think that they love you by the arbitrary reasons that you have decided that they do. What if you have someone who is a little more easygoing and forgetful, who isn't great at maintaining structure and schedules, but would drive across the city to grab your favorite smoothie if you asked, and would take a bullet for you when push comes to shove? Does this mean that this person loves you less because they aren't quite as conscientious and not quite as thoughtful as you project that you would be if you were in their position? I haven't thought about this before, but it's funny, maybe even foolish, to say things like, I would never do that to you. I think we have all said those words at some point, but the thing is, if we were actually in their shoes and we lived all of their same experiences, maybe we would do exactly the same thing that they are doing. It's like all of us who think that we wouldn't have been Nazis or think that we could never take a life. Maybe not. I digress. There's always a little space between the way other people show love and the way that we want to be loved. And the only way that we can close that distance is through proper communication and usually a little compromise. Personally, I do think the sweet spot is found somewhere in the middle. It's It's in creating space for your differences and coming closer in your sensitive areas and leaning into your strengths and covering each other's weak points. I honestly do not know why so many people are looking for someone who operates the same way that they do. Actually, maybe I do know. They're probably seeking comfort and somebody who doesn't really challenge their way and create friction. But I would not want that at all. I wouldn't want to be with someone who shares all of the same strengths. I think that it is much more effective to be in a relationship with someone who is complementary. And what I mean by that is being with someone whose strengths are opposite to your weaknesses and vice versa. And then spend more time appreciating the strengths and the differences that they have that you don't, as opposed to expecting them to be just like you. That is how a good team works. Like, if I'm the goalie of the team, I'm not going to be going around expecting the players to play the game the way that I do. That would be ridiculous. Is it cool if I share a little bit of my personal experience? In relationships, I'm always asking, how's your heart? What do you need? What are you feeling? What can I do for you? Do you need food? Are you hungry? I'm constantly asking because I'm willing to do just about anything to make sure that you are good. All you have to do is name it, and I will say, as you wish. That is my default settings on how I try to show up with love and care. But if you say, nothing, babe, I'm good, thanks for asking, I will usually take you at your word, especially in my younger years. I've worked a lot on my ability to take more initiative without guidelines and being more attentive to the little things and being more intentional with doing things that I know will be well received and appreciated. Pro tip: in your notes app, create a to-do list or a list of things that your partner has enjoyed or has mentioned. This is massively helpful for those of us who tend to get lost in the day-to-day hustle. But what happens when you ask someone what they need and they happen to be someone who is uncomfortable with communicating their needs? So when they say nothing, they are actually hoping for something. Yes, this does mean that they are lying, but I don't believe it's completely conscious or malicious. They are afraid of rejection and they don't want to be a burden. Receiving makes them feel guilty, but all they want is to feel like you know how to love them without an instruction manual. Yes, it can be frustrating at times, and yes, it can seem irrational at times, but I encourage you to look at it like this. They love you and they are afraid of their needs pushing you away. If they didn't care about you and just wanted to use you, they would not hesitate so much in demanding and taking everything that they can get from you. Okay, one more personal story. I'll never forget. Growing up, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she was, and still is, a clean freak. I remember we would be running late for things and everyone would be out the door except my mom because she was still inside cleaning something. Now, if there is one thing that could touch my mother's heart, it was when she was out running errands and us kids did the dishes or the laundry or the vacuuming before she got home and without being asked. Don't get it twisted. There is a difference between having someone who obediently does what they are told and someone who steps up on their own volition and handles something without being asked. This is something that separates adults from children. So if your partner has to instruct you in everything that you do, they will begin to see you as a child. Talk about a romance and intimacy killer. It's not rocket science. If you guys can't figure out ways to step up without being asked once in a while, you need to have a good hard look in the mirror. Actually, correction. You need to spend less time looking in the mirror, you immature, self-centered son of a... Granted, some people will have wounds around that too. For example, maybe as a kid they tried to do thoughtful and romantic things for the people that they loved, but were constantly met with rejection and dismissal and indifference. So now they cope and stay safe by sticking to only doing things when they are asked or when they have specific instructions. Like it or not, a lot of our current behavior patterns are simply products of old programming from our past that do not profit our present. And as long as you continue to input that same programming, you will continue to get the same results. Let me talk to you, fellas. If you know your girl finds it difficult to ask for things, step up your sensitivity and care game. Make a point of going out of your way once in a while without being asked and without asking what she needs. Get up and make a decision. Go get the flowers. Go book the tickets. Go reserve the table. Go make a smoothie before work. Go write her a note. It does not take much to make her melt. She just wants to know that you love her and think about her without being told to. She wants to feel safe with you, and you can either criticize that or capitalize on it. You can either minimize her feelings or maximize your support in helping her manage them. And ladies, if you know that your man responds best to direct communication, then stop sitting around stewing and expecting him to read your mind, because if he could, you better believe that he would not want to be inside of that ball of yarn that is out here constantly trying to prove that he doesn't care about you. Ask and you shall receive. And if you don't receive willingness to partner on your needs, then you have received an answer on how this man is going to show up in the relationship. And you can do with that what you will. And like the woman in the video said, your asking does not devalue his actions. Many men will jump if you just tell him how high. Do not forget to appreciate and respect his efforts by never devaluing them, because how you choose to communicate can either encourage him to do more or to do less. So I hope you found this video valuable and that it opens up deeper conversations in your relationships. Thanks for watching.